Why are you so angry?
Good morning, YouTube. Tired Metalhead Weatherman here. So, let the madness continue. I want to almost get into last night because the weather, well, throughout the day, really, yesterday was insane. Wedge tornadoes, over 10 tornadoes, but I want you to pay attention to what you see right here. Yeah, that's another moderate risk for today. So, here is the current convective outlook here. This is over towards Oklahoma City, a large portion of Oklahoma, and even into Kansas here. Moderate risk for severe weather. This is wind and hail driven, but there is a tornado threat with this. But I also want you to look at the next 3 days. Slight risk. We aren't done at all. It's literally been a whole week's worth of severe weather. And there's still some days on here where there's still potential for severe. Potential's not too low. But also look at last night's reports. 10 tornadoes, 317 wind reports, 163 hail reports. Good grief. This really is looking like May. I was kind of joking around when I said June may be having a weather identity crisis, but I think that it's actually come to fruition here. So also keep in mind we do have a slight risk over here towards the Gulf Coast and a marginal risk towards the Ohio Valley. With all that being said, let's get into the details of today's threat. Again, as far as the graphic is concerned, Oklahoma City, Fort Sill, Woodward, just east of Liberal, Kansas. That's where our moderate risk exists. Again, mainly a wind and hail threat. Very significant wind threat tonight. We're probably going to see big time numbers with that again, but there also is a moderate risk for hail. There is a 10% area with the tornado threat today. Thankfully, no hatched risk, but conditions could become favorable enough to where that ends up coming into play. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. We do have a 5% area over here towards the Gulf Coast for tornadoes, and then for the wind and hail threat, there's a 5% area even for the Ohio region. So a lot of interesting stuff going on here. I'm going to have to kind of make this a little bit more brief since I got to get going for work soon, and I still got to try to do a little bit of rough editing to this video. That being said, this is us looking at the shortwave here. This is heading into lunchtime, and really the shortwave starts to kick in at about maybe 6 or 7 o'clock central for a lot of these regions here. So that's when I think the most severe weather has a chance to occur. A lot of this is also going to depend on timing. Depending on timing and the mode of storms, we could very well get a few isolated supercells ahead of the main line, and that's what will increase the tornado threat. So that's where the concern exists for that. Then, of course, this is all going to transition into a damaging wind, and it's indicated here. Taking a look at the soundings from the mid-level, there you go. Good example. But this is a pretty elongated audiograph here, too, which is kind of impressive. However, like I said, kinematically speaking, not the strongest setup, especially towards the low level. It's all really the mid-level that's super impressive. This is a mid-level driven event. Good example of knowing how the storms are going to end up being damaging wind producers is this D-cape. This stands for downward cape. Whenever you have cape above 1,000 or D-cape above 1,000, damaging wind potential is usually very high at this point. Like I said, it's going to be a very interesting and probably a pretty long night here. Also, let's peep over towards the Ohio Valley where we get this shortwave to be set up here right around the same time, actually. And this is coming from a completely separate trough. So, as a whole here, just because it's a marginal risk doesn't mean it can't be upgraded to a slight risk. I wouldn't be surprised at all based off of what I'm seeing there. Not really going to get too heavy into soundings this morning. Like I said, I'm kind of on a crunch for time here. Then, of course, we're also going to look towards the southeast. I do see potential for some development later this afternoon, or maybe even towards lunchtime. It could start towards lunchtime and then kind of progress from that point here. See a little, not necessarily, I guess I would almost call it a mini trough, but it's definitely not anything impressive. It's more so divergence than anything else. Pretty much the same with this setup, too. That being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the low levels real quick, just to give you an example of what I've been seeing. However, I do think things may have changed since last night. From what I can see, Okay, there is a little bit of an uptick there, but it's in like a little small pocket here. Definitely away from where most of the supercells would fire, which would be more towards southern Oklahoma. But maybe the northern side of Oklahoma over towards Kansas might be where that damaging wind potential really ramps up. The low level jet is a little bit more impressive to the southeast. I don't know if we would put a 10% risk with that. I think it's going to mainly stay a slight risk for the most part. However, I'm not going to take anything off the table here. This year has been full of surprises, especially throughout May. Even though the numbers were low, there were still some crazy instances. So over towards the Ohio Valley, low-level jet ramps up late, but I think it'll be a little bit too late to interact with those storms. So the threat should stay low there. Another interesting thing to note is the dew points here. We can actually see the beginnings of a dry line developing over here with this setup, and I think that's where the concern really comes in for severe. There's plenty of lift for these storms to work with. Storms could fire as early as the lunchtime hour across this region, but really starts to ramp up later in the evening. Here's our dry line here earlier in the day. Pretty strong dry line too. And these storms will end up forming along the boundary here and kind of advancing forward from that point. These also are going to be fast moving storms. So whenever you get a warning over in these areas, over towards Oklahoma, Kansas, you're not going to have a lot of time to react. You may have 30 minutes, a little bit less. Sounds like a lot, but these storms move quick, especially when they have little setup, especially with dry line setups like this. I'm pretty sure you guys already know that, if being from those areas mostly. So keep an eye on the weather tonight, especially as we get into the evening and overnight hours, because it could persist for a while. Over towards the southeast, of course, we already know, being so close to the Gulf of Mexico being open for business, so to speak, with its moisture flow, dew points are going to be rich. In the 70s just about the entire day for you guys. Over towards the Ohio Valley, we do get this little area over here. We're getting into those 60-degree plus dew points, so it's going to be a very humid, very muggy day over here. So as a result, I think with this type of dew point, any storms that end up in this environment will be a little bit more amped up at the very least. But that being said, there's a couple other things we got left to look at here. Mainly going to be looking at the Cape, and then we're going to look at reflectivity here. As far as Cape is concerned, over towards Oklahoma and Kansas, we get some pretty good values going into the day. 2,000 to 3,000 joules from HRRR here, especially as we get later into the afternoon here. Cape is highest towards southern Oklahoma here, and that's where my concern really lies as far as the tornado threat is concerned. Like I said, elongated autographs, but a little bit of contamination with this sounding possibly, but nothing to rule out. Nothing I can't rule out here at this point. As far as the Cape is concerned, we're sitting at 3672 joules per kilogram, and then of course D Cape is absolutely ridiculous. We're near double the what you would almost call the minimum in a sense. Not to say the damaging ones can't happen below 1,000, but we're at 1832. We're not far off from 2,000, which is nuts. This is nuts to think about. But yeah, across this region right here towards Oklahoma and Kansas is going to be pretty intense. Over towards the southeast, we still have a decent bit of Cape, especially earlier in the afternoon. As we get later into the day, we start to lose some of that. And then there's a small bit of energy over here towards Ohio to watch as well. But that's pretty much the main deal that we have going on there. Last thing to do is take a look at reflectivity. And we're also going to have a little twist with it as well. We're going to look at the updraft helicity. So you might not be able to see it because I'm not zoomed in. I'm not going to have the time to, unfortunately, today. But when I move these forward, you might see a couple of these little black streaks. So I'll show it to you once they pop up here. So this is looking towards 20Z. Haven't really seen anything develop yet as far as updraft helicities. Probably won't until about 23Z, which is right here. If you look really closely, you can see these little black marks that weren't there before. Those are little updraft helicity streaks, and these are indicative of severe weather potential, especially with tornado potential. It's a good sign. But Notice those supercells right there towards southern and central Oklahoma. Those are the ones I'm kind of concerned about if this model run comes into fruition. But main area that I'm seeing that at is over towards Oklahoma and, well, parts of Kansas maybe. As far as the other two areas, I'm not really seeing that. So again, the real threat's going to be here. But a very impressive setup indeed. And then by the time we get towards midnight across this area, there's still updraft velocities right here, along with the bowed out segment. So storms, like I said, they're going to be persistent through the evening and into the overnight. So let's make sure we're staying weather aware over here in Oklahoma. It's not anything new for you guys. I'm sure you know how to handle it, but just making sure you're on your game. But that being said here, probably going to be another live stream. So whatever case, make sure you're hitting that like button, decimating that subscribe button, and face kicking that share button, because this will be day 6 that I'd be going live to cover weather. So hope you guys can show up. If so, I hope you guys enjoy it. But until the next video, this has been Tire Metalhead Weatherman. Take care, have a nice day, and I'll see you soon.